We are in the middle of Pei Daled Halachos, and what we're going to do is we're going to start with the topic and then get back to the Shulchan Aruch later on in this year, rather than start from the Shulchan Aruch side of it. Okay, we're going to be talking today about excuse my cold, about raspberries and blackberries, and we'll see as we get to it. Can you just close the door, please? We're going to see as we get to it how it has to do with what it has to do with our simon, our sif. But I'm going to first, before, just give you a little background on what they are. As you probably know, Rabbi Eismach and I went on a trip, on a number of trips to learn about this. So just some background to what it is. Okay, raspberries and blackberries are fruits. We call them fruits that have two parts to them. Okay, this one part is called the druplet, and the other part is the receptacle. And that is to say, this is a raspberry. The druplet is all these little, I don't know what you call it. What do they call? Nodules that sit around here that are the fruit I made out. That are the fruit. That's the part that's the more edible part. And on the inside, where there's a cavity on the inside of the raspberry, that cavity has something called the receptacle. Okay? And the blackberries have exactly the same thing. The difference between them is that in the raspberry, when you pull the fruit off the tree, the receptacle stays on the tree, leaving a cavity inside. As opposed to on the blackberry, the receptacle stays inside the fruit. So when you pull it off, it's stuffed up. If you look on the inside, it's a more solid fruit. Okay,
the receptacle is really the stem.
It's connected to the stem, but on the raspberry, it comes off as you pull it, and on the blackberry, it does not come off. Okay, and the difference is that it has two practical applications for us. One is that because the blackberry has a receptacle in it, the blackberry is a much more solid fruit, which is more capable of being washed and handled than a raspberry is. The raspberry is hollow, so it's not as able to be worked with as far as getting rid of the insects. And the second is that because the raspberry has this hollow inside, it has more ability for more places for insects to hide in. Okay, even blackberries have plenty of places to hide because between the druplets there's lots of space in them. But the raspberries has this whole hollow inside in it where the insects can hide even more. Okay, we're not going to talk about this. May have to do with halachos we learned earlier about insects that come in after the talos. We're not going to talk about that part because this opening on the inside only opens up once the thing is off the tree. It doesn't open up when it's on the tree. Okay, how do you harvest these fruit? I'm telling you the parts that I believe are relevant, okay, so you bear with me. There's two ways to harvest. There are two ways to harvest. But when I'm going to talk about raspberries the whole time, but raspberries and blackberries have very similar processes, the way they're harvested and grown, and as far as they're just about the same. We're going to talk about this we're going to call it raspberries, but it's really both. No. So, yeah. Okay. So now, the way you harvest raspberries, not by hand, by machine, is use this machine called the raspberry picker. Okay, this raspberry picker is this, as you can see, it's this very large machine. It is so tall that its two legs go. It's looks like the letter ches, okay, which goes over the bush. The bush is, let's say, 5 feet tall, and the picker is. The floor of the picker is higher than that. It's got these two legs coming down, and the operator sits on. I don't know if you can see him. The operator sits on the top over there, and what happens is there are these brushes that spin around, and as those brushes are that are on the inside are hitting the bush, shaking. They have these bristles coming out of it. They're shaking the bush and causing any ripe berries to fall off the tree. Okay, we'll see what it has to do with us. We're not saying it. Okay, they fall onto the bottom. You see on the bottom there's a place for them to be caught, and then
inside they fall into the machine.
Onto the bottom. That bottom side.
There's a basket to catch it.
It falls onto there. Then it gets blown. From here back up to the top of the machine. It gets blown by ear up to the top of the machine, where it falls into the basket, and they then bring it back to where it has to go to the
factory.
To the place where they process it. Okay, that's how you do it when you pick it by machine. When you pick it by hand, the guys will pick it all by hand and stick it into the container. Okay, and
they still do that.
And I'm going to explain to you why they still do that. And what it is like this: when a person produces fresh, if you want to sell raspberries fresh, what you do is those raspberries do not get picked by machine. They just get picked by hand. And the reason is because the machine picks ripe fruits. It shakes the tree, and all the ripe fruit falls off. That's perfect for frozen fruit. You take a ripe fruit and you freeze it. When you want to take a fresh fruit, when you want to sell it as fresh, you don't want to take ripe fruit because let's say it lasts for 2 weeks after it's ripe before it spoils. You want to take fruit that's almost ripe. That way you get an extra couple of days. You let it ripen in the container on its way to the store. So by the time it gets to the store, it's ripe, and the people who are eating it have then another 2 weeks before it'll, let's say 2 weeks to spoil, however many weeks it takes to spoil. So they pick by hand fruits that are not ripe. Okay? And enough to
How does the machine know which ones are ripe?
because it just shakes the tree. And when it shakes the tree, the ones that are ready to come off, they fall off. The ones that are not ripe, they hold on to the tree. Okay, so what's relevant to us is that the fresh ones get basically, and the one more thing is that fresh ones cannot be washed. We'll talk about washing in a second because that causes mold to grow in them. So fresh berries that are picked fresh, a person goes over, pulls them off the tree when they're almost ripe, puts them basically puts them into the container, and that's it. Nothing else happened. What you have here is what used to be on the tree 3 days ago, or whatever. Someone pulled it off the tree and put it. Basically, he didn't put it exactly, but basically put it into the container, and that's it. Nothing else. The people who do frozen, when you do frozen, it gets more of a process. I'm leaving this all up to what it has to do with the practical. And it goes through 7 steps, the way we count it. Okay? After it does this picking, the next step is, it's not working on my thing, so I'll show it to you like this. The next, it goes into cold storage. First they chill it, okay, before they work with it, they want it to be colder. And then everybody does afterwards is they do a blower, which works. It didn't work on the slide, so I'm sorry. This is a blower. This is a blower. In the middle of the bar, it's being blown up. If you see over there, it's being blown in the air. And that's to remove, that is there to remove. This is just
air blowing down on it, that's why it's bouncing up.
Blowing up on it. Blowing from underneath. Blowing from underneath to blow off all kinds of particles, leaves, anything that doesn't belong there gets blown out of there. Okay? Then it gets, then it goes through a water spray.
Why wasn't the particles land the same place as the raspberries land?
Because
they're light, I guess it gets sucked away. They're lighter.
I don't remember what it is that keeps it from falling right back down. I don't remember.
Lighter.
Then there's a sprayer. Okay, when I say sprayer, this is not any huge water bath. It's a light sprayer like you see over here. Someone checks it, they rinse it again, they put it to liquid nitrogen to freeze it, and off it goes into big nitrogen. I don't have that. And then it goes into a tunnel. Then it gets frozen now. Okay?
So how many steps is 2 steps?
Excuse me?
Is this 3rd step?
I said 7. I counted 7 steps of this, okay? First you make it cold, you sort it by air, water spray, visual inspection, washing it, nitrogen bath, freezing in the freeze tunnel. Okay, I counted 7 steps.
What's the shaking outside?
And now, there's another nafkamina within frozen raspberries, which is the very finest berries are the ones that are sold as IQF. They're sold as what we see as individually frozen, you buy in a bag. Those are the finest berries.
What does finest mean?
Quality. The best. Fine. Like fine and...
No sunburns on it.
No.
It's not burnt. It's not dented.
Right. Okay.
You know,
as opposed to other ones that are not as good, the ones that are not as good berries, they only go through a few of the steps. They don't go through all these steps. And what they do is basically, after they've done a little bit, what they have to do with it, they basically puree it. Okay? They basically turn it into a mush with more bigger or smaller pieces depending on what you're trying to get. We looked at that stuff, and the possibility of there being a bug there is really, really infinitesimal, that a bug could make it through that puree. We're not going to talk about it. It's sort of
a whole bug.
A whole bug. Oh, a whole bug. Okay. We're not, it's sort of negated our idea, but we're going to leave that part for now. Okay? So now, when we had, now let's go back to the fresh berries, the berries themselves. Standing outside on the farms, out on the farms, Rabbi Eismach and I looked at dozens of berries. We just pulled them off the tree. And look. And we see nothing. No bugs. And here they are, they're supposed to be infested. We looked with our own eyes, and we looked at it, and we looked, and we we can't see we didn't see anything. So we called somebody and said to him, what are we missing over here? Somehow we're missing something over here. And he said to us, it's very simple. When you pull, the bugs that are in there are small. They hide inside the berries. They hide in the cracks and crevices between the drupas. And if you wanna find the bugs in there,
The balls.
It's what these three pieces. If you want to find the bugs, what you need to do is you need to get them out. Okay. It's something that Chiyuv actually says you're supposed to do. Which is this, and what you're supposed to do is you take the fruits and you drop them on a piece of paper, on a white piece of paper from I don't know a foot and a half up. You drop them down, and that causes them to come out. Okay. Rabbi Schwartz said they come out. His svar was they come out like in an ventilator. When they for milling weed, he was here 100%. He had his whole cheshbon for why they come out. It's really a shach later on. We're going to come to it later. Maybe it's halacha yud, halacha. I'm sorry. Yudalad, talk about when you grind wheat that the bugs run out. So we did this. We took a bunch back inside, and the company who had been telling us a whole spiel, these people, the farmers, how much they do to make sure that they get there are no bugs, and they do a lot to do it. Lo and behold, there were bugs crawling every place. Okay, there were bugs crawling like anything.
And after the
no, fresh out of the.
They do efforts in the field.
They do efforts in the field. Yes,
we went through the books,
all kinds of stuff. And we showed them, and look, behold, there were bugs. He was absolutely floored. He absolutely couldn't believe that there were bugs. Okay, what did you say?
You believe him?
Do I believe him? What? That he was surprised?
Yeah.
No. It was genuine. The
guy's in the business. He doesn't.
No, the reason is because we didn't see any bugs either. Until we did this, we didn't see bugs looking at it like this. Looking at it just in your hand, and he put in tremendous efforts to make sure that they didn't get any bugs. Really, I have to tell you, their interest is really not that there shouldn't be bugs in what you eat. Okay, really, their interest is that there shouldn't be bugs to ruin their vines, which would then they wouldn't get as good fruit from it. That's their real concern. Well, they wouldn't look at it. They eat the fruit and it looks brown and stuff like that. Okay.
You see any bugs?
I don't see any yet. Okay, we'll give it some try later. That's why I didn't want to eat them yet, before we checked it. Okay.
I just wanted to see.
Oh, I thought you wanted to eat.
No, I wanted to.
Oh, yes, you can look at it. Yes, you can give it. Okay, so the thing is like this. We're going to assume this. It's not for now. It's not for now. But we're going to work with the assumption that raspberries and blackberries, the infestation is a miyat hamatzah. Okay, we're not gonna. It's a question whether it is miyat hamatzah. Maybe it's worse than miyat hamatzah. We're going to work with the assumption.
Worse meaning what? Sounds more like a life.
What?
Almost sounds more like there's a life.
Why do you think that there's a right?
They say you found the.
So the numbers that we found and how frequently you find them looked to us like a miyat hamatzah. I'm skipping that part of it. We became that close, even though it's actually very important for what I'm about to tell you. But anyhow, that's what it is.
I did 2 containers with this drop method and 1 book.
Okay, so it depends. Sometimes you find, sometimes you don't. The way that people find bugs like this gave the impression that it's a miyat hamatzah. Okay, so now the one question we have to deal with is a person. This is really not from our simon, but we'll talk about it now. Is a person mechuyev to do this kind of checking? Maybe a person is supposed to do is take a fruit, look around by himself, look at it, look. You don't see any bugs, so you can eat it. Maybe that's all you're mechuyev to do.
When the bugs come out of the fruit,
Yeah.
how easy is it to see? Do you have to really stare to see them?
No. You see them walking across the paper.
Oh, okay.
They're on a piece of paper. Yeah. They walk.
They would be dead.
We're getting to
They're
that.
not going to walk.
We're getting to that.
They won't come out.
Okay, we're getting to that. So the one question is, are you mechuyev to do this kind of a checking? Maybe mechuyev to do is to just look around, and if you don't see it, then there's no bugs, then you can eat it. Okay. So there's a riot to this. There's a riot to this. This right. I'm not going to because you're distracted. There's a riot to this. Rabbi Kissinger has a riot to this from Kashrus. Okay.
No, it was it. What happened? When did this appear?
I want you to listen to me for a second. Okay. So there's a riot to this from Kashrus, and the Kashrus says like this. The thing is that we're going to have in a few halachos. If you have a person who checks something for insects, and then you look at it afterwards, and you find bugs in there. So now the question is, should you trust this person tomorrow? The person checked, and he obviously didn't do a very good job because you found bugs after he did. So the question is, how do you decide whether the person is or is not qualified? And it is like this. If you found bugs that any person who checks should have been able to find it, then the person is disqualified. Obviously, they're not careful, or they're not trustworthy, and you don't trust them anymore. If you find bugs that were very hard to find, that a regular person wouldn't have found, then the person is not possible because of that. Because, okay, they did what a regular person does. They didn't do this extra amount, so the person doesn't become possible because of that. Okay? So now, in that context, the Knesset was talking about it. What happens is, he says, he's talking about that. He's not talking about what checking. He's talking about that kind of a thing. He says, the din is, he said he's talking about parsley. We have over there. If you have parsley, and he said he found that if you take parsley, if you look at it yourself with your eyes, you're not going to see any bugs in it. Just look at it, you're not going to see any bugs. We're using white instead of black. He said, but if you bang on the table, okay, which is actually what people do still, you bang on the table, then you see. Now we're probably not going to see what he said, but he says if you bang it, and you see noiflani menu to learn ein mispar, okay, loads of bugs come pouring out of it. Okay, and he says the bugs are green, to learn gamkin yoroikim, and you can't see them. You can only see them on black. We did it here on white. You can't see them back. He said, and therefore, so now he said, what he's talking about is, therefore, if the lady didn't find it, when she just checked it by hand, don't passel her because of that, because she didn't realize that she was supposed to check it. Okay, that's what he's talking about.
But this, why is it black?
We didn't know black because they're green bugs. The green bugs. The bugs are green.
You know what he writes here? He writes a bal nefesh.
Okay, wait a second. That's what Gishan just said. Now look what he says. L'chein, bal nefesh yibbe kol hayirakas mikodim. A bal nefesh should check all the vegetables before him. Ubeprad, at this time when there's more bugs, and therefore, Manati is asking Lechov any Kim Hakach. I only eat certain parts of it. See, that's what he did.
What have to do with Neman or something?
His discussion that he's talking about is if you found bugs in this stuff after a person checked them, should you trust them? Should you not trust them? So he's saying is that this is an example of a food that an average person wouldn't know that there's bugs in there. I'm going to now teach you how to show that person that there are bugs in there. But people on their own wouldn't have known that. So the question Rabbi Kissinger said was, he says, wait a second. He says, all he says is that you should, a bal nefesh. He's like, bal nefesh, you have to call your ruckus, he should eat them before he does it. Why isn't he telling the person that he's mechuyev to do, everyone should be mechuyev to do that?
One second, he's talking about kolay, he's not talking about that part. That particular first says that has to.
That what?
The area is a curry pipe, whatever, right? That's my value.
So you're going on other ones.
Right.
So what
does he tell you to do? Other vegetables.
Because you never know. You have to do the other checkers.
Okay, so, and what does he tell you to do? He said you should check them. Why doesn't he tell you that you should bang them? He just told you that the way to find the bugs is to bang them.
Okay,
So Rabbi Gissin just said, now, I'm not telling you that everybody agrees. Rabbi Gissin just said is that, he says, banging something is not a method of checking. He says, it's too undefined to say that you're mechuyev to bang something. He says, how many bangs should I make? How hard should I bang it? It's hard to say there's a procedure. If you see to inspect it, I'll look at every leaf. I'll look. I won't see it. I won't see it. He says, I don't know. He says, how am I supposed to bang? How many times am I supposed to bang it? He also said.
What kind of sheriff?
What he said was he wanted to say what Rabbi Yisrael wanted to say was that really the banging was just a way of demonstrating that there are really bugs. That there really are bugs. He says because the people didn't believe that there are bugs. That's why the lady is not considered irresponsible. She didn't find them because she wasn't expected to know that they're there. Now I've demonstrated to you that they're there. Now go and check them by visually. Just look over the leaves by yourselves by hand. Okay.
Oh man, what kind of sword is that?
That what?
You know they're there. You know when you're going to bang them, when you visually you don't find them. When you bang them, they come out. So, okay, now you bang, I'll go look visually. When you don't, you're not going to find them.
The answer is, I forgot, I'm sorry, I forgot to say it. What we're working on this question here is, when it's a Mir HaMatzah, it's only Chiyuv D'Rabbanan. I forgot to say, I'm sorry. Since it's only Chiyuv D'Rabbanan to check for the thing, therefore, it could be the Chum Chayu so much to check.
Sounds like it was a life.
That does sound like that, right? It does sound like it's terribly infested. To learn a mitzvah sure sounds like there's a lot of it. Okay, so I have to tell you, he thought that a riot from this, everybody who would read this would think the opposite. Everyone reading the Knesset Bill thinks that the riot is, you see, you have to do even kinds of unusual things. He thought, punk fakir, and Rabbi Schwartz said, look, he said, the reason why we check things, we're not talking about that right now, the reason why we check things is because it's Efshel Avure. It's Efshel Avare. Well, Efshel Avare means you gotta drop it on the table, so that's Efshel Avare, that's how you're gonna find the bugs. He said, that's what you're mechuyev to do. So Rabbi Schwartz said, yes, you are mechuyev to do that. And so even though this is not through a visual inspection, you might not see any bugs. Okay? But if banging it, and we have some other guy who said you should put sugar on the chmetz, and if you're banging it, it's going to get the bugs out. Then if bangers can get the bugs out, the dropping them can get the bugs out, then you'd be mechuyev to do it.
Or the banging gets the bugs out, just proves that there's bugs. Do you mean every single
Gets them
bug?
out.
Every single bug is going to get out of it?
So, Rabbi Schwartz said that if a person would drop it and there would be no bugs would come out of it, okay, then you're finished. Then you've done enough.
Okay.
He thought that if you did that way.
But if you find a bug, don't mean after you bugged it, it's mutter because all the bugs came out.
Why
He
not?
said, drop it again. And he says, if you go through a run with no bugs coming out of it, you're finished. Now, there are two ways he thought of it. Here, Rabbi Schwartz thought that meant there's no bugs left. And other people say this, well, maybe there are some bugs. Maybe there's not going to be in a much anymore. Maybe there's not going to be in a much anymore. Meaning,
The hard
same raspberry.
The one that gets stuck in there, the guys are, strong.
I got one raspberry out, a bug came out. I do it again, nothing comes out. So what does that tell me?
Does that mean
Does it
that-
left, everything left?
No, I don't think so.
Or just held on for the ride?
Maybe it's right. Maybe it's don't know.
so there are those who will tell people, if you find some bugs coming out, then just throw the batch out.
I agree.
Rabbi Schwartz's thought was, if you drop it, get bugs, try it again. If you get no bugs, then you're free and you're on your own. You're safe.
You're alive.
We're getting to dead ones in a second. Okay. So far, so now we're talking about fresh berries. Now we're getting to, now we have to talk about frozen berries. Okay? That was the more serious trial, which is frozen berries. We're getting tracked in, don't worry, it's coming. Okay? And we're talking about frozen berries. Frozen berries, obviously, if you drop them on the table, there are no bugs coming out of them. Okay? There are no bugs that come out of a frozen berry. The bug is very dead. He's not coming out anymore.
Is that what only come out when they're alive?
Well, they crawl out.
Right.
They crawl out. When we're dropping them on the table, the
Force.
the scariness, all kinds of svars as to what makes them come out when you drop them. But when they're dead, they're not coming out. Tchias HaMesim we're not doing. So they're
In
not.
other words, they cling to the side?
They're inside. They're in the little cracks and crevices. Okay.
But if their moms are in between these things, right? Because, that's what you're saying.
Correct. They're hiding in between this, what they call the droplets.
There's no way to...
Okay.
When you freeze something, a berry, if you drop it when it's frozen, it's going to have ice crystals, so nothing's going to come out. That's...
Well, nothing's going to come out.
Live or dead, it's not going to come out if there's ice on it because it's water.
They don't put it in. No, they freeze it in liquid nitrogen.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
This is a organic thing.
Yes.
When you freeze it, just by the fact of freezing, it's going to get ice on it.
Okay.
Okay. If you take something that has ice on it and you drop it, you're going to get ice to come off of it. You're not going to get...
Okay, that might be true.
So,
Well, we're sure not going to get bugs come off it because they're dead.
But then, if you let it thaw a
Saying they're
little
alive,
bit,
they would have come off.
but then if you let it thaw a little bit so that there's no ice on it, it's water. So even if they were alive, they're going to be able to stick on it because it's water. So I'm just trying to clarify that no matter what you do after it's frozen, dead or alive, they're not going to come off either because the water is there or because the
That's fine.
frozen.
No problem. Okay, so
You don't have to do
now we're talking about the frozen berries. So let's just see what we spoke about so far, and then we're ready for the frozen berries. Okay, the fresh berries, we're assuming they're mean amatsu, and you're mechuyev to check them by this dropping method to see if they come off. When you harvest a frozen berry, some of the steps that it takes to harvest the berry are steps that would get bugs out. Think about it a second. How did they get the berry off the tree? How did they get the berry off the tree? They dropped it. They had the harvester. They had this harvester. And what did the harvester do? It shook it on the tree. It dropped down onto the tray on the bottom, and then it got blown up, and then it get blown a little bit later. Right? Those are all the same things that we're talking about to get the bugs out. When it drops onto that thing on the bottom, it's just as likely to get the bug out as my dropping it onto a piece of paper. Okay? What they're doing is something that would chase bugs out. The rinsing that they do to it is pretty schwach. Yeah. This blowing could potentially get some bugs out. The rinsing is schwach. But what I'm saying, there are steps here that have some potential of getting rid of bugs.
When you drop the thing, is it that they're going to run away, or they're knocking the ones out?
They're going to run. It's a question in Sfarad, yeah.
Let's say they're dropping this in the tray. Is there enough time for the bugs to actually get out?
Yeah.
I don't know, when's the blower
It takes a little time. They roll over to the side and then they fly away.
That's not like that, right? It takes a few seconds.
Okay.
That's enough time for the bug to come
It's
out.
like, here it is.
Well, no, we're laying and sit here. I mean, how
Well, we
long
did it
No, they came right out. No, they don't. You drop it.
Well, plant in one stage, you're right out.
Okay.
Right out.
So if you do it in a frozen berry, you're not going to find the insect in the frozen berry because we're not going to come out. My reason, Ken's reason, whoever's reason you like, they're not coming out. So how do people even know that there are bugs in frozen berries? Okay, so the only way that people can find them is, I'm not going to give you all the gory details, but essentially they take the berries, the frozen berries, put them into water. In a way, they end up breaking apart the berries, After they break apart the berries, they filter the water through a cloth. Look at the cloth, and on that cloth you can see if there are bugs or there are not bugs. And there are people who have found bugs in frozen berries. They have found them in that. Okay, but what happens is you understand that if you do that, once you're finished doing that whole procedure, there's nothing left to eat. Okay, you've destroyed the fruit, and there's nothing left to eat.
Right.
So what it is it was a very interesting when this was going on. While I was working on this, not now, some time ago when I was working on this, I was in the middle of traveling. Okay, and as I was traveling, I got a chance to speak to all the mashgichim who showed me how they take apart the frozen berries and find the bugs. Who told me, see, look, there are bugs in these things. Each one, just about every one of them, I spoke to the Rav HaMachshir who oversees the hashgacha that person works to. Okay? And every one of the Rabbanim HaMachshirim told me, no, of course you're not mechuyev to do that. No, of course, no, it's mechuyev to go to such lengths and destroy the fruit. And we're going to talk about it.
Again, you're talking about midamotzi.
If it's a midamotzi, yes. We're going to talk about why that should be true, okay? And every one of the mashgichim who was doing this was doing it as, look, see, I can find the bugs, so you can't eat it. And every one of their Rabbanim HaMachshirim was saying, no, you're not mechuyev to that. No one's mechuyev to go to such lengths to find the bugs. Okay, it was just a...
Well, that's called bedikah, to destroy the fruit.
That's what we're talking about. Okay, so...
I
don't understand what the mashgichim do. They couldn't serve.
He's going to add a lot of...
So, what?
How are they able to serve the things?
Frozen ones? So,
You tell me they were checking in a way that they
frozen. They were checking frozen ones and saying, you see, I can show you how many bugs there are in frozen berries.
You mean they weren't practice?
And therefore saying to you, therefore you can't eat them. Since there's no way to check them, and therefore you can't eat them.
You can eat
them. Their conclusion was, and therefore don't eat it. Okay? So you would say
How do you
is...
define some midamotzi? The doctor used to not putting one bear into the water, probably 50 or 100, right? And they come out with, let's say, 50 berries. If they got 50 berries, they come up 50 bugs.
So
I'm going to say that each berry has one bug.
There was no hanacha that it is a midamotzi.
I said we're not going to talk about that part. That's its own shmooze. We talked about by midamotzi. It's own shmooze. How they decided it was a midamotzi. We're accepting that it's midamotzi.
Around that hanacha.
Okay. You would think, so you would say is, once I have a frozen berry and it's not mechuyev to check it, my hanacha would have been to say, well, it's a chiyuv d'rabbanan to check it. It's not possible to check it anymore, so I'm not mechuyev to check it anymore. Okay? So Rabbi Neustadt, now from Detroit, he wasn't then. Rabbi Neustadt said that it's not true. He thought that you should be mechuyev to check it. Why? If you look in Hilchos Treifus, it's in Siman.
Watch take off the page. Rabbi, you just keep it off on your page.
Siman Lamates, in Siman Lamates, it says, what happens if a person checked an animal, he has an animal, he checked it, we check the lungs because they have a midamotzi of them have treifus. The person checked an animal, and the lungs got eaten. Okay, an animal came along and ate the lungs, and now he's not able to check them anymore. Okay, so what is he supposed to do now? A midamotzi of animals are treifus in their lungs, but he can't check the lung anymore because the lung is gone. So the Mechaber says that since it's only midamotzi, it's only d'rabbanan, so therefore the person, it's not possible to check it. It's not possible. The lungs are not here anymore. So therefore you're allowed to eat it because mid'oraisa it's mutter. It's a chiyuv bedikah. There's no way to do a bedikah. So what does the chol want from your life? What are you supposed to do? But that's what the Mechaber says. So if you're a Sephardi, you can eat the frozen berries. He said, but what does the Ramah say over there? The Ramah says no, you're not allowed to eat it. The animal's treif. Why? The Shach says why? Because when the Chacham said that you have to check for a Mir HaMatzui, part of that din is, and if you don't have it, sort of to enforce that din, they said this, and if you don't check it, you're not allowed to eat the meat. So when the part of the din of saying you have to check for Mir HaMatzui is, the Chacham added some strength there by saying, and if you don't check it, then you can't eat it. So if the lungs disappear, you can't eat it. So he said it's in Cain, if the berries are frozen and you can't check them because the bugs are dead or the bugs are frozen, whatever reason is, you can't check it. So he said so now if you're an Ashkenazi, you can't eat it. But in order for the Chacham to strengthen the takana, that says you have to check certain things.
They only made their takana, so if I lost it, so they want to strengthen their takana. But that's in a knife one, I'm not going to ruin the rest of the animal to here. But if
it's there, if I can't eat it, the animal's going to go in the garbage. You can't eat it. You can throw the animal in the garbage. It's treif.
But I'm saying, but in a regular case, so here, when you have a meat of a case where you lost the lungs, so then in such a case, they say low plug. Yeah. But in an etzem, where the etzem fruit, where it's going to be impossible to ever eat this fruit.
Okay.
So then maybe they didn't say
that's just one case.
Right, it's me always.
Right.
Yeah, we'll come to that. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to come to that. You're a very good point now. Because, yeah.
Rabbi Kiro is saying that the Chachamim didn't say it, and then Rabbi Yossi was the same. They didn't have the same Gemara. What's going on?
It's a good question. That's a good question. It's not a Gemara that says that you're not allowed to do it. The question is whether there's a later takana, like a strengthening or it's understood. Whether it's understood that if you can't check it, we strengthen takana by saying that you're not allowed to eat it afterwards. That's a good question. Okay, so that's what he said. So he said, so you see from there that you're not allowed to eat it. Okay. The problem is that same din is repeated in Hilchos. That's our din. That's where we come to this whole thing. That's where we're talking about raspberries today. Because the same din happens by Taloim. What did the Mechaber say? What happens if someone cooked the food that needed to be checked, and he cooked it without checking it first? If you could still check it, so you have to check it. Of course, you have to check it. And if it's not possible to check it anymore, if you cooked it, and now that it's cooked, it's impossible to find the bugs anymore, so what's it in? Mutter. You're allowed to eat it. Why does the Mechaber say it's mutter? Because midrabanan you have to check it. If you can't check it anymore, then you don't have to. That's it. The Chofetz only Mechaber you to check it if you could check it. If you can't check it, you can't check it. What does the Ramah say on that? Nothing. So the Ramah does not. So how come the Ramah argued in Hilchos Treifus? In Hilchos Treifus, he said if you can't check it, you're not allowed to eat the animal. And over here, he didn't say, why does Rama say, no, according to us, you're not allowed to eat it. You have to throw the food out.
So it could be told it's
so this Why is it a cheskes isser on the animal? Why is it cheskes isser? Transfer into a to transfer into a.
You mean because the Rabbanan put a takon on the lung?
Okay. So the Shach says. So the Shach asks the kasha. The Shach asks the kasha. He says, "How come the Ramah doesn't argue over here? How come you argued over there in Siman Kessi? He didn't argue over here." The Shach's kasha right over here. He says, "How come he doesn't argue?" So the good kasha. Good, of course, a good kasha. So the Shach. So the Shach answers. The Shach answers that the difference is like this. One, there are two reasons why say the food is mutter in our case. There's only one reason to say the meat is mutter. The reason for the meat is that maybe it wasn't a treifa. Okay? That's not enough. But over here, so our case has one reason also, which is maybe there were no bugs. That could be. It's a meal amotzi. A meal amotzi means that maybe there are bugs, maybe there weren't. So that would be one reason that wouldn't be enough. But there's a second reason. The second reason is that there's a svek over here. Because over here, you also cook the vegetables. Cooking the vegetables is something that could get rid of the bugs. Cooking them up, I don't even get rid of them, would disintegrate them to the point that they would be mutter. So here there's a second reason to be mutter. That's why the Ramah doesn't argue. Here there's two reasons to be mutter. Not just that there might have not been bugs in the first place, but there's a second reason. Maybe the bugs that were there, the process that you did to it got rid of the bugs. So Memela, in that case, the Ramah is willing to agree to the Shulchan Aruch that since you can't check it anymore, you're not moving to check it.
Please don't say that.
I'm not.
No.
There's a long footnote here. There's a long footnote here. We're not talking about why it's Amsat.
No, then there's no bug.
It's a long.
Even if you could say, there's no bug there anymore.
Whoever wants to could read the footnote. It's a long footnote.
You can't say there's no bugs in this.
Why?
Because it's not true.
We can talk.
If you want to say that there's no obvious bugs or that there's no whole bugs, but to say there's no.
In each berry that I pick up, there might be no bug in this one.
No. You said when you cook it.
Yeah, I cooked up. So I had a batch of. Let's say I had a batch of lettuce. Okay, and I made stuffed cabbage out of it. That's cabbage. Could it be that this cabbage had no bugs in it? It could be that this whole head didn't have any bugs in it. So I don't know that there are bugs in it. Sometimes cabbages have bugs in them, so therefore we check them. But this cabbage, it's possible it had no bugs in it. So that's why it's possible that this one didn't have it. Okay. So one reason is, we saw that when you make IQF berries, when you make berries that are going to be frozen, the process that you do to it, the harvesting, the washing, and the blowing of it are things that potentially could get rid of the bugs, to the point that we also have a svek seiko. We didn't cook it. We didn't cook these bugs, these vegetables, but we also did things to them that could have gotten rid of the bugs. So we have the same svek the Shach says that for our most we have for our frozen berries, not for our fresh, but for our frozen berries, you have the same svek. Some of them there were bugs there in the first place, and even if there were bugs, maybe there were things done to it during the processing that got the bugs off. So first of all, we have the same svek. Second is, even in the case of the lungs, even in the case of the lamates, when the Ramah says you're not allowed to eat it, the Ramah says you're not allowed to eat the meat, the Ramah says, "B'makom hefsek gadol you can eat it." That's what he said. He said, I didn't tell you because I wasn't ready to. He says, "The makom hefsek gadol, you could eat it." Okay, so in a
wasn't the loss of the whole animal always a hefsek gadol?
I don't. So he says, in the case of the hefsek gadol, you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to eat it. To which Rabbi Yashiv says he's not talking about berries. Rabbi Yashiv says he brings it from Shlomo Kluger. Shlomo Kluger was talking about a case where there was a year that there were bugs in arbus, chickpeas,
and a lot of
and that. It was considered, in order to find the bug, you have to cut each chickpea open. They considered that beyond what a person is to do. Just think in perspective. They said it was beyond what you had to do to cut open every chickpea to look for bugs. That was too much. But of course you don't have to do that. So the shaila was, you were not going to be able to eat chickpeas that year because the chickpeas were infested to a meal of matzah. And Shlomo Kluger says, that's considered, it's impossible to check. Because you can't, he's cutting open each one, it's considered impossible to check. Not being able to eat chickpeas for a year is considered a hefsek gadol, and therefore you're allowed to. The Ramah would be moidle. In this case, you could be sama on the deraisa and eat the chickpeas without checking them. And Rabbi Yashiv used that to explain what Shlomo Kluger said. So if he would say that, if he's saying that to say that for chickpeas for a year is considered a hefsek gadol, that even the Ramah is moidle, that you could be sama on the deraisa and not check it. So like what Yankee said. So frozen berries, to say no frozen berries altogether. That's just as much.
Chicken could be on with the staple food, and I also this guy.
Staple food, that's all they eat. Chickpeas? I mean, they eat.
Not in America, but Hashem,
chickpeas, you would go to close the bottle.
Never did that.
Listen to Rabbi Yashiv's. Excuse me. Listen to Rabbi Yashiv's words. Rabbi Yashiv's words. Rabbi Yashiv's words are, V'leser kol hamin, ein lecha hefsek gadol mizeh. To answer a whole min, he's not saying because that was a little. I don't remember what his case was looking at. He's bringing from Shlomo Kluger about the chickpeas. That's what he says. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to tell you one more thing which I'm not going to tell you, which is there's another way to be miyashiv. There's another way to be miyashiv. Why the Ramah doesn't argue over here? Why he argues in Hilchos Streifah over here?
Yeah.
And that hesber has to do with the next year we're going to talk about, which has to do with broccoli. That's the next year. That hesber. There's another hesber for why the Ramah doesn't argue. I told you what the Shach says why he doesn't argue. Mm-hmm. There's another way to explain why he doesn't argue. According to that hesber, it would for sure be more in our case. But I'm not. That's to entice you to come back next time. Anyhow,
but I'll be with you for 3 days.
So the bottom line is based on this. The serious position is Rabbi Schwartz agreed to this, that because of this, IQF raspberries and blackberries, which are roughly the same, they're not exactly, we can talk afterwards, there's a little bit of a difference, they're roughly the same, because of this, since at this point, even though you could have checked it when they were fresh, you could have checked them before they froze them, since at this point they're not able to be checked, and you'd be answering the whole min because of that, we allow them, even though there is potential, there are bugs in them, based on this thing.